to see you one last time.
This video brought to you by Wilson's Heart, exclusively for Oculus Touch. When you think about Skyrim, there's a lot that probably goes through your mind. An incredible open world to explore, the exhilarating rush of downing a dragon. However, Skyrim also has its share of dark and disturbing moments that you may have overlooked while off enjoying your adventure. This is James from Curse, and today we're reliving some of the most deeply messed up moments in Skyrim, because that's the kind of bright and cheerful people we are. The once proud snow elves are now known as the Falmer, a blind and hideous race of elves that were poisoned by the Dwemer into submission during ancient times. Years of that poison and captivity has left their eyes useless and their backs hunched. The Falmer mostly reside underground, however there are a number of areas in Skyrim where they come to the surface in search of victims. Those they find meet a bloody and gruesome end. However, one of the worst things to happen to the Falmer's victims is what occurs after they've been killed. In Raudthar, you'll find a number of areas overrun by Falmer, as well as some tanning racks and tables with leather on them. Leather is certainly a useful thing to have in Skyrim, so you might not find that odd. However, the tables also contain another useful item: human flesh. So did that leather come from cowhide, or something else? In the quest to the Taste of Death, you're asked by a priest to investigate the Hall of the Dead in Markath, because it appears something has been eating the bodies.
Flesh has been chewed off. Bones were snapped to get at the marrow inside. We haven't caught anyone or anything yet. It's like it knows when I'm there.
Inside you'll find a woman named Iola, who will ask you to clear out the shrine to Nemira, the god of decay. She is the one who's been eating the bodies, and she will ask you to lure the priest back to the shrine so that he can sanctify it. To complete the quest successfully, you will not only have to deceitfully lure him into the trap, but also take the first bite of his flesh. It seems like most of the citizens of Markath are there, including the local butcher, who proudly advertises
the bloodiest beef in the Reach.
Also present for the ritual is the widowed shopkeeper, who at one point seemed genuinely distressed about losing her husband. But if you talk to her during the feast, she says,
"Did you know I inherited the store from my late husband? Shame what happened to him. He had such good taste."
Skyrim's Dawnguard DLC is simply full of nightmares waiting to be had. Your introduction to the Volkihar clan is one of the moments you'll remember best, because it's an absolute bloodbath. The hall is covered in blood, organs, bones and chunks of flesh. Silver plates and goblets have blood splattered across them. However, what really stands out at this feast is the vampire cattle. You can see them laid out on the tables, but they aren't some kind of blood-sucking cow. The vampire cattle are people. Living people. Kept by the Volkihar as slaves and as a fresh source of food. You can actually talk to them during the feast, though they don't have much to say. They are just cattle after all. Cattle who can occasionally serve the drinks. This is the scene you're met with shortly before deciding whether or not you'd like to join up and become Vampire Lord Dovahkiin. At this moment, the moral implications of your decision should be pretty clear.
Start at the beginning, as usual.
The Thalmor are elven supremacists of the most extreme order. They seek to eradicate the worship of Talos by destroying anyone who supports it. In the diplomatic immunity quest, you'll witness the torture of the prisoner Etienne Rarnis, who is apparently thought to have some connection to the Blades.
You know the rules. Just answer the questions.
Etienne has been held for an undetermined amount of time. It seems that he's locked in a constant cycle of telling the same story while being beaten by a guard. The words "again" and "as usual" are used during the exchange, and Etienne repeatedly explains that he's already given all the information he has. Unfortunately, what he does have is vague and inconclusive. At the end of the fruitless exchange, the guard says,
"I must say I continue to be disappointed in your lack of cooperation. I hope next time you will do better."
There's no telling how long Etienne has been captured for, or if he actually knows more than he's letting on, but it's clearly not the first time he's suffered through this ordeal, and there's obviously going to be a next time.
Women murdered time and again, and all the guards care about is the war.
The man known only as the Butcher stalks the streets of Windhelm, and his journals provide us with some insight into his mindset. He generally refers to his victims in terms of their body construction, writing about how the city is filled with good sources of bone, flesh and blood. He targets his next victim because her strong joints should contain exquisite tendons. This sounds like the deranged ramblings of a gore-obsessed serial killer. However, when you discover the killer's true identity, it gets downright sad. Calixto Corium, owner of Calixto's House of Curiosities, was driven mad by the death of his sister, and keeps a set of embalming tools and necromancy rituals to hand in a desperate attempt to bring her back from the dead. This explains the reason he's so concerned about the specific body parts of his victims. He's trying to reconstruct his sister's body from scratch. Morning Never Comes is a Dark Brotherhood quest in which you effectively ruin a family. Muri grew up as a close friend of the Shatter-Shield family, but found herself taken advantage of by Aelin Dufont.
What I need is for Elaine Dufont to die. I want him hunted down and murdered like the dog he is.
Aelin was a womanizer and conman who used her close connection to the family to rob the Shatter-Shields. Muri was a victim, but found herself bearing the brunt of the blame for the robbery as the Shatter-Shields threw her out in the cold. Muri bitterly wants revenge on Aelin, which is understandable, but she also wants revenge against the Shatter-Shield family, and as such, a secondary goal to the quest is to kill their only surviving daughter. If you do it, you'll be paid well, and Muri will be grateful. However, the Shatter-Shield family just lost a daughter to the Butcher. What is killing their other daughter going to do to the family? If you do kill the girl, the next time you visit the Shatter-Shield household, you will not be greeted by her mother like normal. Instead, you will find her suicide note, in which she says she simply cannot find a reason to live, having lost both of her daughters. When you arrive at the Frostflow Lighthouse, you'll immediately notice something wrong. The lighthouse was supposed to be home to a happy family of 4, but all you can see at first is a dead horse, a dead human, and the bloody remains of a Churus. The human is Ramity, the mother of the family that had fulfilled their lifelong goal of purchasing and living in this lighthouse. You'll also find a note from Habd, the family father, explaining the story of how he bought the lighthouse, but his children complained of hearing strange, scratching sounds coming from the basement. As you explore, you'll find the remains of every other member of the family. As it turns out, there were Falmer living in the basement. Ramity was killed with an axe, while Manny, the son, met his end to a sword. Sudi, the family's daughter, committed suicide with a dagger left to her by her father. That only leaves Habd, the father himself. Once you reach the end of the abyss, you'll find a massive Churus Reaper. Kill it, and you'll find Habd's remains inside.
When I was 13, I accidentally burned down the family home. Bit of lightning gone awry. Oh, but soon after I mastered my gifts completely.
Festus Krex is an old mage who doesn't much care for Astrid's leadership and revels in the image of being the cranky uncle of the Dark Brotherhood. He also claims to have killed his wife over semantic differences in the temperature of his bathwater. But what really gets to you is the way he meets his end. You don't see the death of Festus Krex, you find it and you fill in the blanks. His body is pinned to a tree by what looks like 100 arrows. It's hard to even tell who it is, especially since his arms are up in front of his face in a futile defense, but it's his distinctive robes that give him away. Hopefully you can get used to the sight, as Krex's arrow-riddled corpse will be up for display on the tree for the rest of the game. Necromancers are generally not the nicest of people, but Arondil is particularly notable as a guy to stay away from. He once lived in Dawnstar, but was exiled when it was discovered to be performing experiments on the dead. They didn't even know about his fantasies for the local girls. When he moved to an ice cave, he was able to combine his love of necromancy with his sexual deviance. He started by reanimating the dead to become his unquestioning servants, bending to his every whim. Of course, he soon becomes bored with the already dead and turns his attention to finding fresh victims. Now he kidnaps and kills whatever passing woman he can find, purely to build a harem and army of the dead. It's a different take on necrophilia, but it's still necrophilia. That's all the messed up stuff we have to report from the Frozen North today, but that certainly isn't all there is. Let us know your favourite disturbing story from Skyrim in the comments below, especially if it's one we missed. And as always, enjoy the game.
And to see you one last time.
This video brought to you by Wilson's Heart, exclusively for Oculus Touch, bringing you an interactive mystery experience unlike any other.